Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 8. In this video, we're going to talk about McDowell's the excuses that make professional ethics irrelevant. In this article, McDowell states that there appears to be a crisis in professional ethics. The public perception is that professionals know what is right and wrong, but they don't act ethically. Of course, people believe that their own professional doctor is ethical. It's just that most of the others aren't. According to McDowell, the problem is not lack of education. The main problem is that lawyers just don't live up to their own ethical standards. For us to understand the problem, we should try to understand the concept of excuse and how it is used in various situations by professionals to avoid responsibility. 4 different types of excuse are outlined by McDowell: the claim of ignorance, the transfer of responsibility, the irresistible pressure, and the fault of machines. In the claim of ignorance, McDowell explains that professionals will claim that they don't know what the ethical rules are, and sometimes they are being sincere. How often does a professional acting unethically really not know what the ethical rules are? Even if this excuse is true, McDowell continues, it still would not be valid, because it is the duty of the professionals to know what her or his ethical obligations are. Certainly, if this excuse is sincere and widespread, increased education on professional ethical responsibilities would not be the most appropriate response. The excuse of the transfer of responsibility is a real problem because sometimes there is a good reason to believe it's true. For instance, he says, most professional practice today is in large groups where there are many people competing and cooperating with each other. Rivals for promotion, members of the team, junior professionals, and many more could actually be responsible for ethical failure or irresponsibility. First, it's often difficult to find out sometimes it's difficult to find out within a complex institutional network who is the one that is most responsible. Second, there is arguably a problem of collective responsibility, where it might very well be appropriate for the group as a whole to be held responsible. He gives the example of the debate about the German people in World War II and whether they should bear some responsibility for the Holocaust. In some cases, it might be appropriate to hold a team or other collective entity responsible for an ethical failure. The third type of excuse that McDowell discusses is what he calls irresistible pressure. This kind of excuse is many times caused by professionals who regularly feel pressure to act unethically for one reason or another. For instance, they might feel like they must keep up with their competitors to stay viable, or that their employers expect them to do whatever is necessary. They may believe that loyalty to their team or corporation requires that they participate in unethical activity, or that financial pressures due to a large investment in technology or marketing require unethical behavior to get the job done. McDowell thinks that there are 2 broad ways to deal with these pressures. The first is to demand that all professionals be strong enough to resist the pressure. The second is to redesign social structures so that professional services can be delivered in ways that minimize these pressures. He argues that changing society is actually more realistic than expecting individuals as a whole to change. The fourth type of excuse he calls the fault of machines. Since so much professional activity today makes use of complex technology, professionals will sometimes blame the technology or the machinery when things go wrong. Of course, just like the other excuses, sometimes there are good justifications for what happened, and sometimes they are just convenient entities to blame. In a separate section, McDowell offers what amounts to a 5th type of excuse the fallibility of human beings. Someone can always say, after all, people are fallible, and a certain amount of ethical wrongdoing is unavoidable and therefore tolerable. Again, he makes the point that these are sometimes justifiable reasons rather than excuses. We cannot all go through a professional life without some professional misjudgment and ethical lapses. However, this kind of excuse is ultimately, McDowell says, a sophisticated version of excuses regularly used by children. Again, not all these excuses are just self-interested efforts to escape ethical responsibility. They are reflections of the way professionals operate and how they function. McDowell makes the point that teachers of professional ethics should help students understand and adapt to the realities that professionals work under, so that students will, as professionals, adapt to that reality in a way that is consistent with their own personal ethics and the ethics of the profession they are in. I think one of the most interesting points of the article is this. Perhaps the construction of professional codes of ethics that has been going on for decades prevents professionals from developing their own aspirational ethics. In other words, if you are told exactly what is right and wrong, according to your professional code of ethics, why should you hold yourself to an even higher standard of ethics on your own? A good response would probably be a utilitarian one, where making more people act minimally ethical is better than leaving a void some people might fill with even higher ethical standards. So a minimally ethical world is better than not having a code of ethics and just hoping that some people will have an aspirational ethics. McDowell says that one big problem for professional ethics is that professionals are reluctant to criticize the actions of their peers, partly out of professional courtesy and partly to protect themselves. They believe that if they don't criticize the actions of others, then others won't criticize them. Another problem he cites is that in some cases, sanctions are not given for unethical activity. So professionals learn that they may not be held responsible for some types of unethical behavior. All in all, the author feels that the real problem for professional ethics is in the institutional structure, not in immoral actors. McDowell believes that the ultimate task of professional ethics is to help professionals identify the pressures that may tempt them to choose unethical action and to realize that excuses are often a way of just avoiding these tough choices. That's all for now. Have a great spring break. Thank you.